Hello everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Been doing a little bit of talking about performance stuff lately, and we have a few things to do here. A few different combinations. One's hold on, I'll show you guys. One's a 302. So this is something we have to think about as far as performance, because we're limited, because as you can see there are no valve reliefs in these pistons. So we either have to stay real conservative with the cam or put valve reliefs in the pistons. Then we have my 460, and the pistons down the hole quite a bit on this engine, and it's the same deal. I'd like to have certain parts, but this is all budget stuff. And I have the cam right there, and it's a Comp camshaft, and it's actually an old camshaft from back in the day, because I wanted to do this engine the way I would have done it back in, well, going back to 1987. So it's funny how you have to come up with little parts here and there for the Ford 302 and 460. But I got thinking about the LS engines, and we just sold one of them, and we have another one. I don't know why it had a problem with it, but it's ripped apart. I'm kidding. I know why it had a problem, because it's like the LS is capable of a oil problem. They all have the same thing, and guys like to play that down. They're a great engine if you do the right stuff. The oiling problem with the LS is insane to me, what you have to do to correct it. Not one thing, not two, but half a dozen. And then it still isn't that certain after you correct them problems if you're still okay. That's just an engine that hangs over my head. Where the 302 motors, we've had them things and just beat them and beat them and beat them and beat them with nitrous. Never broke one, never split one. The only thing we've had happen to them engines is from having 300,000 and 400,000 miles on them, start losing oil pressure. And that's what's out in the other building there. But getting back to the performance side of this, I was just thinking what we do, how I weighed things out with the heads. Should I put the Dove head on the 460? Should I use the late model head and do it that way? But a lot of thought goes into it. The 302, a lot of thought goes into it, because to make a 302 run, you got to do certain things to help that little engine out. If you do the wrong things, just a couple little things you do wrong with cam timing and things like that, they're not going to run right. Well, anything wouldn't run right, but the 302 is crucial with making power or losing power a lot easier than most of your other engines, because there's no cubic inches. Small cubes is always a disadvantage. So then we get to the LS. So how do you build an LS engine? Well, most guys don't build them. They just get an LS engine, and then you pick up your phone and you say, "Hello, Thule, could you send me a stage 3 camshaft?" Hate to say it, but it's true. And if anybody watching this gets offended, well, how many guys do you know that have that set up? Now, there's a few more companies around. You'll say, well, that's because Thuley's the only guy that makes cams, and that's why he was the only guy doing that for a while. So why is it always a stage 3 cam? Almost every engine we've come across has a stage 3 Thule cam. And to be honest, I'd have to find something a little bit better if I was to try to make peak power. That's just my own opinion. I have my own ways of looking at stuff, and I don't know who made this guy king, but evidently some people think that that's the only camshaft that will work in an LS engine. And I like things a little bit different when it comes to certain engines, as far as camshaft numbers and things like that. I'm different than a lot of people when it comes to that. But I'm going to tell you something. I've even had things said about using older technology to me. So I'm going to address that. Camshafts are supposedly better today with the ramp speeds and the timing events. But I want to ask you guys, how many people do you know that could take a stock big block Chevy with ported heads on it and go low 9s? Well, my friend did, and that was in a 3,000 pound car. So then he decided that car was becoming a dinosaur because I kept failing it every time we went to the track with it, because it was just outdated, the roll cage, and it was going almost into the 8s. So they gave him more and more of a hard time. He says, I'm not dealing with this no more, I'm building a new car. So he builds a Camaro, uses the same old technology, just in a new chassis, and that car on motor went into the 8s. Now take in mind, this wasn't last week. This was about 25 years ago. And it was probably 30 years ago when he first started building that Camaro to put that engine into, because it took a long time to get that car together. He worked on it after his full-time job, and many nights we stayed out there till early morning working on that car. I'd be there a lot of times helping him or just hanging out. But the car on nitrous went with a 225 shot, went 790s at 170, and that's using old technology. And that was a standard bore 454, and I did forget one thing. We put burlap heads on it, and it picked up 1/10 of a second from the steel heads. So needless to say, my friend was upset about that. I've talked about that before, but some guys don't catch on my segments, so this might be something they didn't hear me talk about before. So I can throw that in there. But my point is this: just because something's old doesn't mean that you throw it away and think we're doing something fantastic with the latest technology. Because I see guys, they try to get the best of everything, which we all do, and I've seen the engines where they don't even run, using the stuff that's up to date. And then you'll look at a car like my friend had from 25 years ago, and there's guys today that can't go as fast as that car. So that's my point. So before people want to bust on old technology and thinking guys like my age are washed up, basically, which most guys are great, you just get one once in a while, young whippersnapper. I don't want to be mean or sarcastic. It's just sometimes you have guys that will try to pull all this latest technology on a guy like me, and then it makes you evaluate your whole performance mind, because you think, well, am I behind times? Am I doing something where I can make more power? There's always more power to be made, no matter what you do or what you use. And the minute you think you have it all wrapped up into a little solid ball where you think that you've got it all under control, you're in trouble. Because in the performance world, if you stop and don't try different things, you're going to be stuck. So that's where I have a little bit of advantage. I've tried latest technology stuff, and I've seen where some of it don't really help. Believe it or not, some of these intakes that are bragged up today don't work as good as some of the older intakes from back 30, 40 years ago, depending on what you're building and what you're doing. I'm not talking about something that's making 800 horsepower, 1,000 horsepower. I'm talking about an average throw-together street vehicle in most cases, like a little 302. You can take a little 302 and throw an intake on it, and it's going to be one of the better intakes from back 30 years ago that will work better. It might not work as good on the high scale as far as, well, flow testing and all that, but you put that little 30-year-old intake like a Torker 289 with the 180 plenum. See what it takes to beat that intake on a stock 302 for the street with low compression. Or the Win 8011 that I love, that we've gone, a little dual plane that we've gone 9 seconds with. You might know somebody with 302 or a stroker engine that's going 9s, but I guarantee you, in most cases, you're going to see a big Victor Jr. or Victor, some kind of blown out intake where that thing has every ounce of nitrous they could throw through it. And that's in most cases. If you know anybody that's doing that stuff, they usually don't take a little dual plane and work around little areas like that. That's my opinion about that. And you might know one guy that does things basically like we do. And it doesn't mean that I'm right when I say things. These are just my opinionated Terry's thoughts. If you like later technology, I don't blame you, because it should be better. But I'll tell you one thing that's not better, and it's the latest technology that I've seen, is these LS engines, and they don't oil right. Wouldn't you think they would know how to do an engine that's all performance stout, that the block can hold 1,500 horsepower, and the heads are great on them if you do them up, and you have a 10-second engine from the factory. And wouldn't you think that they would correct an oiling problem? I'm a little discouraged about that. We've had 4 or 5 of these engines, and we've had problems with that out of the box. So if you guys want to stick up for that and say, well, I didn't have that problem, I hope you didn't. And then you have no reason to say anything bad about that. But when you have 3 or 4 in a row that have an oiling problem, and they sit around and you have to rebuild them, and you've never had to rebuild a 302 ever, unless you felt like it. The other motors we have, they lost oil pressure, but it's not lost. It's down on oil pressure. They still run. We could still run them engines if it wasn't for just being low on oil pressure. They were fine, except that they weren't dependable. When something starts losing oil pressure, there's a problem. And who wants an engine to maybe lock up halfway down the track? And then you're in trouble because of that reason. So people say, well, why don't you still running it? I could run it in my street car. If I was just to drive around and pilfer around, that engine was fine. So, hope I explained that right. I'm not picking on anybody else's stuff because we have these LS engines, so I think it gives me the right to say good or bad about both of them. And I've stuck up for the LS engine before. You correct the problems they have, you can't ask for much more than what they offer when it comes to that. But some of these guys want to just act like they're the best thing ever happened to a motor. They are and they aren't. It depends on what you're trying to do with them. You might have a guy say, well, we have 300,000 on ours. You probably do if you ran it stock. But these guys that want to put nitrous and stuff on them, and then they act like they don't have problems with them. You might have 1 out of 1,000 or a couple out of 1,000. You have guys that get lucky. Then you have some engines that's been taken care of better than others. But you have to weigh it all out in the majority. So when I talk about the 302, I'm talking about 302s I've had my whole life. And then I was talking about how many LS engines we've seen come through here that need work. Now, I'm not an unlucky guy. I'm not being biased. You'll say, well, he's a Ford guy. He's talking bad about the LS. No, I had more GM cars. People don't know this about me. I had more GM cars in my life than I had Fords. And people say, well, why are you a Ford guy? I said, Chevy made me one. Because I got tired of breaking axles. My Chevelle, ripping off wheel studs, breaking the rears. I went through 3 motors, 2 transmissions, and 2 rears in a month with my Chevelle. And my father used to say, I don't know why you have the backbone to keep fixing that car like that. I don't understand it. I would get rid of that thing. I just don't have time for that kind of nonsense. In my Fords, I could just beat them to death. I mean, I broke a few things here and there, like motor mounts. Yeah. That's basically what I broke with my Fords back in the day. But most of the time, it was the GM cars that actually broke the motor mounts. So, you'll say, well, that's because they make more power. No, it's because they had a crappy motor mount. So anyway, that's just my little opinions about stuff, guys. It's nothing to do with an argument or anything bad. It's just how I see things. And listen, it's all true when I say something. Stuff that I've witnessed myself. It's not just stuff I make up. It's not something that I just want to say to hurt feelings. It's just what I've have seen right here in our own garage. And I think people know we have some LS engines that run pretty good. So, I have a reason to say what I say. I'm not some Ford guy arguing on some forum comparing the LS to a 302, because I can't stand that argument. You need to compare apples to apples. I had a guy actually called me the other night and said that they were comparing a LS engine to his 302 going into a race. He has a bone stock 302, and these guys telling him that they sit the same with a LS as that 302. That is just a game that people play because they're both factory engines. One's a factory engine that was made from what? 302 is just an evolved 289 or 260 from back in the 60s. So if you want to compare something that's been around that long to a late model, and I consider LS late model, even though they've been out for however long, say, well, they're still 20 years old or whatever. That's not just the point. The point is the webbing and the block. There's not any way, shape, or form you can compare all the performance features LS has to a stock 302. And if you could, and it was legit, I wouldn't say anything about it. I just get tired of hearing nonsense. We have these grudge racers around here, and a grudge racer is somebody that just basically, around our area, they try to suck you in and pretend they don't have anything, and they play it down. And then when they do come up to you, oh, we sit the same. I have a 6.0, but we sit the same as your 302. Do you really? Do you? Because you think you're talking to some young kid that doesn't know anything? Or that you might suck in and take some money from? I don't like that stuff, guys. Anybody really wants to race, you take a gamble. You don't know if you're going to win that race. And there's still some guys out there that do that. But we just have, in my area, a few people, and everybody knows who they are. That's the thing. And these guys that do that don't usually get races anymore around here. They kind of sucked the pail dry because word got around what they were doing and things like that. One of them called my son up when he was 17 years old and had this little car right here. Completely stock 302. And the guy said, we have a stock Windsor we can run you with. So my son gets out there to run these guys for money. And I told him, I said, even if they have the same car with a Windsor in it, they have an advantage over you. And we didn't know this guy was a grudge racer at the time. I didn't. My son did, but he was willing to take a shot because he races. He doesn't have to go for an easy win. So he goes out there. The car is supposed to be a stock Windsor. You guys should have heard that thing doing the burnout, turning that thing like 7,500. And my son's out there with a stock, bone stock 302. And then they checked my son's car for nitrous. I'm like, are you kidding me? You can check my son's car for nitrous, and yet, most likely they had nitrous on that, hidden. Because that's how they work. But that's just part of the racing game, and you either have to put up with it, or, I guess, not race, because there's a lot of that today. So I don't know how it is in your state or your country, but around here you get hit below the belt quite a bit. So, and my video is directed to a couple people when it comes to LS because they don't win the Crown Award, in my opinion, unless you correct all them problems. An engine has to be reliable first, and when the oiling problem's there with them LS engines, then they're not that reliable. I've seen other engines have them problems, and I stayed away from them, even though they made power. So, I never see anybody compare an LS to a Cleveland engine, though. Why is that? You have a Cleveland engine, then guys start kind of backpedaling a little bit. But I wonder why that would be, my friends. I think we know why, because anybody knows what they're doing with them engines, and that really know what they're doing, they might be in for a little bit of a problem. So anyway, guys, I'm going to cut this short, if you call this short. And I'm actually working on the 460 stuff here and trying to get the truck up and running, which I've been doing for the last forever, guys. You know that. So anyway, have a good day. And I want to say God bless you and thank you.